Hello and welcome to another video. Today we're taking a look at an aggressive dragon deck. Why? Because I'm trying to come up with some interesting things to put out for you guys, and since the meta is kind of reasonably set at this point with some decks, it's hard to come up with many variations on decks in rotation. While there is a lot of options, not a lot of them are very good. So this one I found to be okay, definitely not the strongest deck, can fail in a few points. Everything I would leave as is, except for maybe Zeus, which probably is recommended to run the new Azaka, whatever it is, the big dragon. Just because you do get that extra point of damage on 10, or you can actually have the opportunity to lower its cost just a little bit. Either way, I still think Zeus is a fair replacement and a good chunk of damage. The rest is actually pretty alright, and I enjoy most of it. This is courtesy of Pineapples from Shadowverse. He's pointed me in this direction. I did as well, actually. They both kind of directed this, mainly because I was just looking for a deck that I could make some content on, and this one actually turned out to be okay, especially if you need to complete your dailies. This actually does an alright job if you don't have anything for unlimited. So we'll get right into some games and check it out. So first up, we're versing Shadow. Shadow is a reasonable matchup for this deck, I've found. Obviously if they do stick a board, you're going to have a little bit of trouble. But if you are outputting too many threats quickly, they usually have to deal with those beforehand because you're dealing much more damage than they are in a shorter amount of time. So starting off with a turn 1 Goblin is perfect, into a Happy Pig, into an Aqua Nereid. Basically a pretty ideal curve here. Of course you probably could run PDK, but I don't know, I was thinking of putting it in here. I decided against it, just running this straight up. Happy Pig is an amazing card. That 1 heal, or 3 heal, sorry, is just great. So we do get the damage, 3 to the face, plus the summon. We can ignore the board for the most part, no real threats are going to be dropped turn 3. Sculling is pretty substantial, but not going to be enough to deal with our current board. And we can easily follow that up with either another Aqua Nereid or something else. Another Happy Pig. That's going to look nice in the next turn. We can just keep rolling face to damage. We just need to get that damage. Face, damage, face, damage. Pretty much what this deck does best. Especially since you can pretty much ignore Shadow's early game for the most part. Not so lucky though, they do finally get the full clear off. But we are going to be pretty much able to restack here. And now we have the Breath of Salamander, which next turn, being able to use it for 6 is great. Do decide to deal with that 1 Goblin. Get it out of the way. It does leave me quite vulnerable, but I'm willing to accept that. I mean, best case, they only get rid of 2 things here at the moment. Which means we can just roll some damage to the face again, clear off most of the board, and pretty much set ourselves up. So I could have killed probably the Catacomb, had basically a, for the most part, full board clear, which would have been nice. Would have only had to deal with the 1-1. But then I probably would have lost this to the Belenus, which would have sucked too, so I think that was a fine play. So they force their trade, they play their own Lurching Corpse. This is where things go absolutely nuts, okay? So I can easily drop this for 7, it can't be attacked, which is perfect. They have now board locked themselves, so their turn 7 play, which was probably going to be Hector, is completely unplayable. Meaning, unless they've got some kind of spell to deal with this 5-6, they can't do anything, and it looks like they don't, so really nice for that play. Next up, we're playing against Rune. I'm pretty sure this one is a Daria Rune player.
This one's for my family.
You see mostly Burn Rune, but the occasional Daria has been popping up in the last day or so. We've got the Breath of Salamander, which is pretty good against Rune in general. Being able to remove things is always important, especially in the early game. The Goblin is great, especially into the Summoner and then the Aqua. I found Aqua on 3 is almost perfect. Having 2 bodies on board while also having the option to use it in the later game and combo it with Rhea is just crazy. So we do get the Dragon Summoner off. This is why I think the Dragon would be better to run than Zeus, just because you can use Dragon Summon to pull it in the later stage of the game. Whereas Zeus, you really rely on your own draw, which kind of sucks. And Stellar Beast is a card that I'm not too fond on, but also don't hate. I think it's great for the Rune matchup, but the Shadow matchup, I just don't find it being that effective. I mean, it does force trades, but I just always feel a little bad when I use it. Stormborn Wing is another card that I'm a little iffy on. I usually don't want to transform too many things. Usually only in the very late game when I'm already going for lethal is when I like to use the Stormborn Wing. Also, I suffer from a little bit of draw loss, so I don't really have much draw power that I can rely on. So when a situation like this happens, I find it very hard to recover. It's not impossible, it's just more difficult. I think maybe having some form of draw power in the deck could really help. So I didn't have to trade here, but I think it's fine. Being able to get rid of that Illusionist is pretty reasonable. Like not having the Sigil up to proc it again, forcing them to basically have to play another Sigil just so they can use it, which if they hadn't, they would have just used Sigil anyway, and actually got a bonus off it, where here they don't. And they get the trade, which, feels bad for me. No Sigils though, and double Illusionist. Looks like we're actually going to have an okay play. Being able to remove 2 of their 3 Illusionists straight away is really solid.
The name's Levi.
And they just drop Levi because they have nothing else to play. So some okay cards. Pure Hearted and Dragon Summoner are a pretty good draw power. I just don't see them enough, I feel. Like, you definitely have that draw power, it's just not as strong as some other draw power decks really have. Or even maybe even just a Fervor might have been nice as draw power, but I think that might clog up the deck too much for the high end. You really want a lot of low stuff for the most part. Again, another Nova Flare. That's a pretty annoying card in this matchup. But we do get to drop the Rider, which is absolutely crazy. Not as good in the Rune match in particular, but it's still a pretty solid card. Especially with 5 health, we can actually avoid the Levi clear on it pretty reasonably. They are going to go face, but we have got Windblast Dragon set up for next turn. Mutagenic, really hurts us. It's one of the few other ways Rune can really get around that. Mutagenic Bolt. We are going to be able to get rid of this 6-4 though. We should be able to set up the Dragon Tamer just so we have something on board in case they play some drop on me. Dwarven Alchemist. So it's mainly just survival. If we can survive with this 5 health, then this Rune should be able to get closed out. This is where I worry about draw power, when we've got very few cards in our hand and we're probably going to be using 2 to 3 cards a turn. And of course, Grand Summoning. We can actually remove all of this for Salamander, so I actually think that's pretty okay. And we drew Pure Heart, which is one of the better draw cards here. So I'm quite happy with how that ended up. I was severely worried before that. So Phoenix Rider is great. Being able to take advantage of what's on board is really handy. Unfortunately, it's not too great in this situation, but Zeus draw being absolutely perfect. Zeus is going to allow us to end this game in the next turn, provided they can't deal 4 damage to my face through burn spells. Which, knowing what Rune has now, the chance of them doing that is reasonably low. They would need some crazy combo of cards, I think. Especially now they're down to 4 play points. And not drawing into anything really gave me the game. So our last game is going to be against Sword. I always enjoy versing Sword, especially now because it's usually more interesting than hyper aggressive for Sword now, which is nice to see. So we get to see a lot of new cards being played. While Sword isn't very strong, I personally think it's definitely not one of the weaker classes. But we do secure that one drop, exactly what you want in this kind of match, where you know they are going to be playing some aggression in Sword in general. Then we do manage to get a nice Blazing Breath play, clearing the 2-2, hit for 1. We should be able to set up either Angelic Knight or Beast in the next turn. Probably should have considered a better option to remove this 1-3 though, looking at currently what is in hand. Getting rid of it would have been pretty important. I could have removed it instead of removing the 1-2. I think that might have been the better play. So we do get to get that Goblin 4 more damage to the face quite nicely. Goblin is great when you can just stack damage in on it. And if we just keep letting them play cards in the next turn or so, we should be able to get Phoenix Rider right up to quite a good level and be able to drop it for most of their health.
Just the words I was waiting for.
No. Defeated.
But they do manage to remove my entire board. Little sad. Not super sad though. And we get Breath, which is pretty good against Sword, honestly. We just start stacking board again. Worry about the clear this turn. I mean, the 3-1 isn't a big threat to me. I mean, they got to remove this whole board for it to have any decent value. And with our card next turn, we can actually clear these really easily. So we can peg the Salamander, absolutely clear board, we get to keep the 2-2 on board, we get to go face with it, put them to 12, hopefully set up for our next couple of turns following that, especially now we've got Stormborn Wing, which is basically a guaranteed 5 damage burst.
In the name of glory. I must return back to my home.
Pity we couldn't have used the Salamander here. I probably should have thought about that. Arthur is pretty common. Salamander would definitely have been better on that play, but the Raider Arya is actually just as good, and unless they're about to follow this up with a Wilfred, I don't think they can actually deal that much damage to me. They won't be able to go for lethal if they don't have Wilfred. If even with Wilfred, I think it's going to be close. And if they can't ward, Windblast Dragon actually wins the game. Just straight out wins. And that looks like it's going to be the case. Windblast Dragon securing lethal.
An exemplary battle.
I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Aggro Dragon has been quite an enjoyable thing to play while not being overly competitive. I definitely would still recommend playing either a Ramp Dragon, Shadow, or Burn Rune on ladder if you are looking to climb to Grandmaster in rotation. Unlimited is a whole different can of worms, and I am hoping to have a few videos up, hopefully by the time this one goes up. But it's really hard to find something that I can win consistently with in rotation at the moment, just because I don't have some of the cards that are needed to make some of the most competitive unlimited decks, which will be quite interesting. So stay tuned, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. You can check out the link to this deck in the description below, and I'll catch you next time. See ya.